The anime begins by introducing us to Arel, a boy who is of age to receive the goddess's blessing. In this world, such a blessing is bestowed upon reaching the age of 10, when a child receives their class during a sacred ritual. From that point on, they become able to acquire skills appropriate for that class. While Arel is having breakfast with his family, his father Leon comments on how anxious he is, since he couldn't sleep a wink thinking about what class his son would receive. Arel's mother admits she's feeling more nervous today than she did on the day of her own blessing ceremony. As for Arel's sister Ari, she assures him that he's the best brother she could have, and because of that will undoubtedly receive the most incredible class. Leon jokingly suggests this could make him popular with girls, but Arel counters that he's still too young to even consider dating. Leon takes the opportunity to mention that when he was his son's age, he already had girls falling all over him, and that things could happen the same way for Arel. He just sighs, knowing that once his family starts fantasizing, they never stop. Later, a large crowd gathers at the church to begin the blessing ritual. The priest asks the children to come forward one by one, starting from the right side. The first boy to come forward receives the priest's hand upon his forehead, who then casts the spell, allowing the blessing being granted to be seen. Flames, a hammer, and the smell of iron appear before his eyes, and the priest announces that the boy will be a blacksmith. The boy runs excitedly to his father, proud that he can follow in his footsteps. Subsequently, the other children undergo the ritual, each one receiving their class. Meanwhile, Arel calmly waits in line, not showing any emotion at all. His sister tries to reassure him, saying that lineage strongly influences one's class, and with such remarkable parents, he's bound to receive a powerful blessing. When Arel finally steps forward, his family cheers him on, and many recognize him as the son of Archmage Leon and Sword Princess Farah, both advanced class holders. Everyone expects him to be just as extraordinary as they are. The priest instructs Arel to shut his eyes, enabling the goddess to reveal his destined class via visions. However, for some unknown reason, he sees absolutely nothing at all. The priest is confused as there's no response at all and soon realizes the only possible explanation, Arel has no class. The revelation deeply shocks everyone, but Arel simply stands there quite confused. Upon returning home, his parents attempt to console him, assuring him that they will continue to work even after their retirement, so that he won't ever need to worry. Leon insists there's no reason to talk about death or difficulties, but Arel replies that he doesn't intend to depend on his parents perpetually. His sister Ari reassures him that she will always be there for him no matter how he might feel. Arel makes it clear that he's not depressed since he has been training in swordsmanship with his mother since he was little. Even when the sword was too weighty for his young hands, Farah gave him her full support, and because of this, his skills improved. It would be easier if he had a swordsman class, but even without one, his consistent practice has already made him a master. Still, the reality is he hardly got any actual training, as his mother was simply too powerful to serve as a proper benchmark. Even so, Arel believes that effort is what truly matters, and that's why he won't give up. Farah praises him for his maturity, and Leon further adds that he will most certainly achieve greatness. Ari, full of pride, just confirms she already knew how amazing her brother is. His parents then resume fantasizing about the glorious future he'll have, and Arel, being quite accustomed to this, chooses to disregard them and proceed to the training grounds. There, two boys are dueling and discussing how having skills makes everything much easier, as their bodies seem to move almost automatically. The duel is interrupted when they realize Arel is observing and promptly identify him as the boy without a class. He says he's there to train just like everyone else, but they don't understand why. They explain that as swordsmen, they don't have to train extensively, they merely need to test their abilities. To prove their strength, they restart the duel, and Arel silently watches them. He sees that with basic swordsmanship, they're quite capable, and he decides to test them. He steps in, interrupting their duel, to challenge one of them, but the boys are incredulous at the idea of a classless individual fighting a swordsman. Despite this, Arel insists that he will prove to be a worthy opponent, which ultimately stirs their pride. One of the boys accepts the challenge, but first asks if Arel has divine protection, even without a class. He confirms it, assuring him that he'll be fine and that the other boy doesn't need to hold back. This divine protection is another blessing from the goddess, separate from the class, and is granted to everyone at birth. It acts as an invisible net covering the body, absorbing some damage, but if it takes too many hits, it can be depleted, and the person will still feel pain. Knowing that Arel possessed divine protection, the boy wasted no time and launched his sword against Arel's with the intention of crushing him. However, even facing an attack full of force, Arel easily blocked the blows and counterattacked. The other boy watching was confused, not understanding why his friend hadn't won yet. Arel showed no restraint, which utterly frustrated his opponent, leading him to request his companion's assistance for a joint attack. Soon after, both of them charged towards Arel, but he swiftly dodged and held his position, relishing the challenge. For him, encountering opponents who were close to his skill level was the most effective method of practice. When he noticed that they almost hit each other as he dodged their blows, Arel wondered if their abilities really didn't help with aspects like group tactics. Concluding that those two were still immature, he decided to finish the fight with a single movement, giving them no chance to react. The victory was quite clear, but the boys grumbled, claiming he simply waited for an opening to take them by surprise. Ariel simply challenged them once more, but before they could begin anew, a red-haired girl emerged, commanding them to cease and inquiring if they intended to continue shaming themselves. She declared that in a real battle, a true swordsman must know how to accept defeat and not act like a fool. One of the boys got angry, but the other held him back, revealing that the red-haired swordswoman was no ordinary person. She walked up to Arel and recognized him as the son of the sword princess Farah. Because of that, she concluded he must have inherited some of his mother's innate talent, even without having a class. She also made it clear, however, that the two boys before him were mere novices and that Arel shouldn't brag about beating them. Then she challenged him to a fight, asserting she would demonstrate what a true swordswoman could do against a classless individual such as himself. The boys had assumed she was connected to the guard, and she confirmed her father was Captain Evans, a renowned figure Arel recalled visiting their home to seek Farah's assistance in hunting demons. The red-haired girl emphasized that her father was extraordinary, a master swordsman and a revered leader, but everyone still considered Farah the superior swordswoman, which she simply couldn't accept. Arel perceived that deep down, the girl was irritated with his mother and was taking that frustration out on him. Hearing that, she got even angrier, accusing him of thinking just like everyone else that Farah was the best. He confirmed it without hesitation, saying his mother was literally the strongest person in the village. The red-haired girl, refusing to accept it, declared she would prove she was superior, since children inherit their parents' talents. Before the duel, she boasted that she had been training for a year, had already reached intermediate skills, and had learned techniques from her father. Therefore, there was no way Arel could beat her. He, in turn, replied that he had also been trained by his mother and had no intention of losing. Without delay, they both charged into combat, exchanging swift and skillful blows as the other boys watched in surprise. It was unbelievable that Arel was truly classless, as he was able to keep up with someone who had intermediate skills. The red-haired girl was clearly stronger than the others, but Arel noticed her anger was making her careless, which gave him a chance to win. When he found an opening, he lunged forward, but to his surprise, she used a technique called the double blade cut, delivering 2 strikes in a single motion and pushing him back. She was impressed he blocked it at such close range, but Arel fell in pain, clutching his abdomen. He demanded to know how she had attacked from 2 sides at once. She explained it was a special technique, impossible for someone without a class to withstand. He shot back, saying he wouldn't be so sure, and the red-haired girl admitted that at least he had courage. Days later, Arel woke up in his room, still exhausted, and quickly fell back asleep. His sister, Irie, tried to rouse him, and after breakfast, she inquired if he'd be resuming his specialized training, gently reminding him that there was no need to exert himself excessively, as her dream was to forge a world where he could live in comfort. Arel ignored her fantasies and departed, leaving her quite concerned. Ever since he came home full of injuries, he had been spending extensive periods away from the house. To calm her down, Farah showed her a box brimming with broken practice swords, explaining that Arel had used every single one of them. The fight with those boys ignited something in him, making him train relentlessly. Irie admitted she was genuinely impressed, as not even the absence of a class had stopped his development. In fact, he seemed to be thriving. Still, she remained determined to create a better world for her brother. In another scene, we see Arel training in the forest, successfully performing 2 cuts at once, just like the red-haired girl had done. He smiled, satisfied, knowing the hits he took on purpose to learn the technique were totally worth it. Suddenly, a goblin jumps from the bushes to attack him, but Arel instantly responds by executing the double blade cut with perfect precision. The monster immediately falls in defeat, but then a loud roar reverberates, revealing the presence of a much larger and more dangerous creature, far too close to the nearby village. He knows he ought to notify the guards right away, but just as he's about to depart, he hears a child's cry from that very direction. With no time to seek assistance, he decides to rush in himself to rescue whoever is in peril. Hidden within the foliage, he spots the red-haired girl with whom he had previously sparred at the training grounds. She is gravely injured, having had a confrontation with a massive goblin. It was quite unusual for such monsters to come so near the village, but upon noticing training marks on a tree, Arel deduces the red-haired girl had been practicing in the woods, inadvertently attracting their attention. This time, a much larger goblin located her. Arel now readies himself to fight. He understands that against giant enemies he needs to concentrate more on his posture than on his wrist strength. Reaction time is everything, but he knows he has what it takes to defeat the monster. The red-haired girl, exhausted and resigned, simply waits for her own death. However, before the goblin can complete its task, Arel delivers the blow at the perfect instant, slicing the creature in 2. She watches in shock but soon collapses due to the loss of blood. He catches her before she falls to the ground and realizes her divine protection had run out. He then asks for the sacred water, but seeing the broken bottle, decides to offer his own. After drinking and recovering, instead of thanking him, the red-haired girl demands to know what technique he used. Irel replies that it was the double blade cut, but she doesn't believe him because the ability demands that someone possess the corresponding class. He admits it's really complicated, but that's exactly why he trained twice as hard. He believes anyone with sufficient strength, speed, and timing can achieve it, as the power originates from momentum. He also reveals he only learned it because she used the technique multiple times in their prior duel. Observing her up close was the key to deciphering the move, and he hasn't stopped thinking about it since. His confession leaves her not only flustered but also quite confused, as she knew it wasn't as straightforward as it seemed, even though she had witnessed it with her own eyes. Erel explains that he despises losing, so he trained diligently to guarantee victory in their next confrontation. Realizing this, the red-haired girl challenges him to a rematch, stating that since he had saved her life and provided her with the sacred water, it was the absolute least she could do in return. Arel accepts, and during the fight, he surprises her with a third strike within the technique, something previously thought impossible to achieve. She can't grasp how it's possible, as the move should be limited to 2 strikes. He explains that since his version isn't reliant on an official class ability, it faces no restrictions and can be modified according to his capabilities. Even so, the red-haired girl insists that his move was nothing more than a classless imitation and could never be as strong as a true swordsman's technique. Erel, knowing she wouldn't be convinced by words alone, decides to prove it with his actions. She gets ready to counter the 3 slashes, but Arel moves with such speed that she can't keep up, quickly cornering her. He explains that he improved his speed by observing her refined version of the double blade cut, adjusting the details of his execution until he surpassed his own limit. With no other choice, the red-haired girl accepts defeat as Arel walks away, satisfied. Days later, during dinner, Farah mentions that Captain Evans' daughter has left for Brescia, the so-called City of Swords. She herself had lived there in the past, back when she was part of an old guild before she got married. Upon hearing this, Arel begins to consider that he would also like to go there, not solely to explore the place, but rather to discover the extent of his strength and abilities, despite not possessing a class. And so the first chapter ends, making it clear that his journey has only just begun. 5 years later, deep within a forest, a carriage carrying roughly half a dozen passengers was making its way toward Brescia, famously known as the City of Swords. The coachman announced that once they crossed the mountains ahead, they would arrive in Brescia. Upon hearing this, a female passenger, a sword duelist, became excited as it had always been her dream to visit the place. The same could also be said of another passenger, a barbarian, but he chose not to engage in conversation with the woman due to her attire. He complained about the exaggerated size of her sword, which deeply offended her, almost starting a fight inside the carriage. Fortunately, the coachman managed to calm them both down by massaging their egos, reminding them how amazing they were for belonging to advanced classes. Observing their skill in combat, the coachman implored them to utilize their abilities to vanquish an impending orc horde. However, upon discerning that the formidable orc king himself was among their adversaries, both the sword duelist and the barbarian completely lost their courage and resolve. The barbarian was the first to flee, acting like a coward, followed by the woman wielding the giant sword, leaving the other defenseless passengers behind. The coachman, feeling desperate, was at a loss for what to do, until one of the passengers disembarked from the carriage. It was Arel, who advanced courageously against the enemies with such incredible speed that he appeared to be invisible. The coachman recognized the technique as Blink Dash and was absolutely stunned to witness him single-handedly confront hundreds of orcs. As Arel gracefully twirled his sword as if in a dance, swiftly defeating his foes with lightness and pinpoint precision, the coachman found himself utterly astonished. He recognized that specific movement as the princess's sword dance, a unique ability that, theoretically, should only be mastered by women belonging to that specific class. He was utterly baffled as to how that young boy could possibly employ such a technique. What he didn't realize was that Errol, though having no class, was incredibly blessed, or as some would put it, a product of pure nepotism. As expected, he was vastly overpowered, and soon enough, he also defeated the Orc King. After the massacre, he calmly went back to the carriage and told the coachman to drive to Brescia, explaining he wished to train and become stronger. The coachman laughed in disbelief, convinced that the boy needed no further training, as he was already overwhelmingly powerful. He was unaware, however, that Errol didn't even possess a defined class. We then see a flashback from 5 years prior, illustrating how Arel had mastered his mother Farron's unique sword dance technique. At that time, after countless training sessions, he successfully replicated the twin blades technique. His mother, who had already given up on him, believing he was a failure, couldn't believe what she was seeing. When confronted with the truth, she understood how terrible a mother she had been for abandoning him so early. Arel, however, calmed her down and expressed his wish to recreate all of her abilities. He then requested Farron to instruct him in the princess's sword dance techniques, and through 5 years of dedicated practice, he ultimately mastered them. Back in the present, Arel finally arrived in Brescia, the City of Swords. While he was walking through the streets, pondering which place to visit first, a girl stealthily appeared behind him. She attempted to take him by surprise, but he easily evaded it, not even glancing back. Impressed, the young woman concluded he was talented and immediately started her pitch, trying to convince him to join her guild. Arel, however, immediately recognized it as a trick. She likely belonged to a small guild, perhaps even one with no members at all. He showed absolutely no interest in joining. The girl then began to plead, going so far as to promise to go on a date with him if he would only accept. However, he coldly refused, still taunting her by calling her a flat earther, which completely broke the poor girl's heart. Before leaving, he had the audacity to ask which was the strongest guild in the city. Reluctantly, the young woman answered, Black Blade, made up of 8 rank A swordsmen. Following this lead, Errol headed to the guild and learned from the guard at the entrance that he would have to undergo a test to be admitted. He went to register, but when the receptionist found out he was classless, she immediately refused his application and even humiliated him. With no other choice, Arel left quietly and visited several other guilds, but they all rejected him for the same reason. After so many closed doors, he decided to resort to the power of nepotism and used the recommendation letter his mother had given him to join her old guild. However, before he could do that, he was once again bothered by the persistent girl, who simply wouldn't stop following him. In her desperation, she even knelt, proclaiming that she would lick his shoes if he would only agree to join her guild. Even then, Errol refused without a second thought. He ignored her and proceeded to the address of his mother's former guild. However, upon arrival, he discovered that there was nothing at that location. But before he could look into it more deeply, the young woman who was following him was quite surprised to find him there, truly shocked that he would actually go and inspect that particular spot. She then asked if he'd like to check out their place, pointing towards a massive building. Upon seeing it, Arel deduces that the guild must be a magnificent establishment. Curious, he inquires about what could have happened, as it once possessed such an imposing structure, and quickly deduces that they must have fallen from grace. He was absolutely correct. The girl, albeit reluctantly, concedes that the guild's glory has faded, but she promises him that with time, their prestige will be restored, and he will be utterly astonished. She still boasts that they have the king of dual swords, and that the dragon's fang will rise once more. Upon hearing this, Arel recalled his mother's words. She had told him that the leader of her former guild was the King of Twin Blades, and the guild's name originated from one of his techniques, the Dragon's Fang. At that very moment, he recognizes that this is precisely his mother's former guild, and as such, he has no alternative but to go along with her. However, upon entering the building, the girl discovers her father, who is the current guildmaster, completely intoxicated. She scolds him, reminding him that the doctor had asked him to stop drinking, but the man pays her no mind. He instead advises Arel to steer clear of joining them and simply depart. As he turns and starts to leave, Arel notices that the man had lost one of his hands. The girl explains that prior to the accident, her father had been the second strongest man in the city. However, after losing his hand, he transformed into a defeated alcoholic. Feeling utterly discouraged, she believes that after witnessing that scene, Arel will no longer have any desire to join their guild. To her surprise, he agrees to join them, not that he had many options to choose from. Happily, she hands him a form, which he proceeds to sign. Upon reading the form, the girl realizes that he possesses no class. Initially, she believes it to be a joke and asks him to be serious, but Errol insists and even presents his official certificate. Shocked, she reluctantly agrees. Drawing her sword, she threatens him, declaring that if he doesn't cancel the contract and leave at once, he'll face death. In her view, the guild is already teetering on the verge of ruin. Taking on a classless individual would only exacerbate their dire situation. When Arel refused to depart, the girl began to scream, drawing the attention of the sole other guild member, a young red-headed woman who then entered the room. She refers to her as Lilia and questions why she was shouting. Lilia explained that she believed she had successfully recruited a new member, but to her utter horror, she found out he was classless. The redhead, who goes by Reiner, claims she knows Arel, stating they hail from the same town and asserting that they underwent training together. Arel vehemently denies this, admitting solely that he trained with a red-haired boy who was Captain Evans' son. Reiner looks at him with contempt and reveals that the captain only had one child, a daughter herself. Both Arel and I were taken aback, having both previously thought the young woman was a man. Arel apologizes for the misunderstanding, and Reiner admits she's changed a lot since she started taking care of her hair. But it wasn't just her hair that changed, her entire body had transformed. Arel feels the urge to comment, but decides to keep his mouth shut. Reiner informs Lilia that Arel was indeed the very boy she had lost to before embarking on her travels, a revelation that impresses Lilia even further. Reiner, however, is thrilled. She sees this as a chance to show her progress over the past 5 years. She asks if he'd be up for a friendly duel at the training grounds, and he accepts. When they get there, Arel is impressed by the size of the place. As she gets ready, Lilia asks if Reiner really wants to fight someone who is classless. Reiner enters the arena, and Arel watches her preparations. She starts the fight with the same twin blades technique as before. Arel, brimming with confidence, attempts to neutralize the blow as he has in the past, but this time her blade prevails, hitting him square on. Reiner smiles, recalling she'd spent the last few years honing her skills. He might have the same technique, but he could never vanquish her sword, which now carried the full might of a Blademan swordsman's advanced capabilities. Arel acknowledges her progress but wonders why she would reveal her strength to him. She replies that she wanted it to be a fair fight, even though she knew he wouldn't stand a chance. Her blade was now incredibly powerful, so much so that if she struck him with its full might, it could prove fatal. Consequently, Arel shifted to a defensive stance. Reiner, believing she sees an opening, takes advantage of the moment and strikes, but Arel vanishes and then instantly reappears behind her, landing a blow with a new move, the Afterimage technique, a skill exclusively for those with a class. Stunned, Reiner asks how he could have learned that without being classless. He simply replies that hard work can overcome any barrier. However, he quickly realizes his strike inflicted absolutely no damage. Reiner then reveals that she has acquired yet another skill, a technique that allows her to conceal her injuries. No matter how many attacks she endured, she wouldn't display any apparent damage. Faced with this, Arel resolves to employ something more potent. He unleashes a counterattack, a technique passed down from his mother, the renowned Sword Princess. This time, Reiner cannot withstand the force and is severely wounded. She collapses to the ground, crying that she lost again, even after becoming stronger. Arel praises her strength but reveals that he has also become more resilient. Indeed, many things must have taken place for him to achieve this level. Lilia shows up, carrying spiritual water, and chides him for causing her to cry. Reiner, for her part, leaves in tears. Then Lilia brings Arel inside and warmly receives him into the guild. He reminds her that she wanted him to leave before, but now it was too late. He had already signed the contract and now he has no other option. Arel inquires about the guild's destruction, and Lilia then discloses their significant debt. He insists on knowing how much they owed, and she whispers the amount in his ear. Then, she brightens up, mentioning that the guild competition is drawing near, and if they emerge victorious, they'll be able to recover all the money they've lost. That's why she was looking for a new member, since they needed 3 to register. Arel accepts without hesitation and encourages her, saying they'll make it, but he notices Lilia is still reluctant. Upon questioning her further, she reveals that all the other guilds possess 5 members, and they would be forced to contend with 5 opponents on their own. But instead of feeling disheartened, this only motivates Arel further, as it means the challenge will make him even stronger. Lilia's father, observing them from the door, also feels a sense of encouragement. Arel then asks why Reiner stayed despite the hardships, and Lilia explains that when she first came to the city, Reiner was rejected by everyone until her father took her in. This leads Arel to conclude that Reiner must feel indebted to him, but the truth is, Reiner hasn't changed. The one who changed was Lilia, who matured, just like Arel. And now, both of them hold great hopes for the guild's future, trusting that through their efforts they will be able to rise again. The next day, Arel wakes up in a strange room, but soon remembers he's now living at the Dragon's Claw Guild headquarters. Leaving his room, he finds Lilia and Rhiannon sitting at a table and greets them. Lilia inquires if he rested soundly, and Arel responds with a nod, mentioning it had been a long time since he had slept in an actual bed. Noticing Rhiannon's complete silence, he begins to wonder if she's still feeling upset about having lost to him earlier. Lilia enthusiastically interrupts his thoughts, proclaiming that they are now finally eligible to compete in the guild tournament. Beaming, she excitedly reveals that the Dragon's Claw is already registered and eager to fight. Curiously, Arel inquires if the prize money will be sufficient to fully pay off the guild's debts. Lilia confirms and begins to explain the rules of the competition, stating that to be victorious, they must eliminate all members of the enemy guilds. Rhiannon expresses her concern, fearing that they will have to contend with strong opponents while being outnumbered. But Lilia remains optimistic, believing the likelihood of encountering Class A swordsmen is slim, and that they are well equipped with 2 Class B swordsmen among them. Arel, feeling puzzled by this classification, asks what exactly it signifies. Rhiannon scoffs dismissively at his ignorance, and Lilia then explains that swordsman rankings range from D all the way to A, determined by each individual's strength. She also reveals that there are only a total of 20 ranked swordsmen throughout the city of Brea, and both she and Rhiannon hold the rank of Class B. Even though Arel managed to defeat Rhiannon, Lilia still doubts he could be considered a ranked swordsman, due to the immense power disparity between the different categories. All of a sudden, Lilia recalls that the announcement of the tournament battle pairings is set to be released, and she quickly goes to verify. Immediately after, Rhiannon also rises, and Arel inquires about her destination. Upon hearing she is off to train, he seeks confirmation that she is indeed a power-type swordsman, and inquires if she possesses any additional abilities beyond her primary skill. Then, Rhiannon explains about the ability called Guts, which significantly strengthens her protective barrier. Arel, eager to master this technique, steps closer and gently takes her hands, causing her to blush and believe he's being romantic. But to her astonishment, he requests that she strike him with the scabbard of her sword. Arel mentions that this could potentially bring them closer, yet Rhiannon quickly responds, stating unequivocally that she is nowhere near crazy enough to engage in such a type of relationship. He then clarifies his desire to learn the Guts ability, convinced that the optimal way to master it is through repeatedly enduring strikes, given that its power lies in enhancing one's resistance. Rihanna tries to impress upon him that these abilities are blessings divinely bestowed by the goddess and are not things that can be so easily learned. However, Errol counters that he already learned techniques like Twin Slice and Shadow, which leaves her speechless. With resolve, Rihanna escorts him to the training ground. Arel requests to use her heavy sword. She initially believes he wouldn't possess the necessary strength to wield it effectively, yet he astounds her by managing it with remarkable ease. He declares it's a direct outcome of endless hours of dedicated training and expresses absolute confidence in mastering the skill. Impressed, Rihanna, recognizing Arel's earnest efforts, makes the decision to teach him. She warns him that she won't be taking it easy, and he with a smile says he feels fortunate to have such a powerful woman from his native land. Embarrassed once more, Rihanna lifts her sword and their training session commences. While the two are intensely training, Lilia suddenly appears, running frantically, overwhelmed with the news. In tears, she reveals that their first opponent in the guild tournament will be the Black Blade Guild, which is known as the strongest guild in the entire city. Knowing that their leader, George, is a cruel individual, Lilia worries he will attempt to mercilessly crush them. Nevertheless, she makes up her mind to face destiny and get the group as ready as she can. When Lilia sees Rihanna striking Arel, she mistakenly believes they're bickering due to poor teamwork. Rihanna attempts to clarify that it's merely a special training exercise, but Lilia is convinced she's simply venting her frustration. Arel, feeling tired, rises to complain of hunger, but Lilia insists he drink holy water prior to his meal. The days then quickly pass, and the guild tournament day finally arrives. Arel is impressed by the enormous coliseum and the gathered crowd. He overhears spectators discussing the upcoming fight between two major guilds and placing their bets on the Black Blade, believing the Dragon's Claw has no chance. Lilia gets annoyed, but Rihanna stops her from causing a scene. Arel is surprised to discover that bets are being placed on the tournament, and Lilia, with a cunning smile, remarks that the odds are 20 to 1 against their guild. Arel is quite taken aback by the numbers, but Lilia, in a fit of rage, reminds him that this only means no one has any faith in their victory. Nevertheless, she perceives it as an opportunity. If they manage to win, they could earn a fortune and be free from all their debts. She confesses to having mortgaged her house and wagered all of the guild's savings on their own victory. Rihanna calls her crazy, stating that the odds of defeat are enormous, but Lilia responds that when you're at rock bottom, there's truly nothing more to lose. At that moment, George shows up, sarcastically commending Lilia's dedication in defending her father's guild. He questions her about the classless hero she recruited, and Lilia realizes he's making fun of them. Faking concern, George insists he's just saddened by the rival guild's decline, a completely obvious lie that only serves to fuel her anger. He taunts Lilia, stating he intentionally set up this confrontation because everyone would be thrilled to witness the former strongest guild competing against the new one. George also claims he presented her with a golden opportunity to earn money through betting, but then he laughed, absolutely certain that she stands no chance against his ranked swordsman. Lilia retorts that they will emerge victorious no matter what, and George departs, leaving her enraged. Arel remarks on how cunning George is, mocking them through seemingly kind words. Soon it's time for the tournament, and the announcer starts hyping up the audience as the crowd erupts in cheers. Arel realizes George won't personally face them, and initially believes the leader might show mercy. However, Lilia quickly reminds him that every member of the opposing guild is a formidable Class A swordsman. Rihanna echoes this sentiment, agreeing that their opponents won't hold back, which in turn ignites Arel's eagerness to witness the prowess of these powerful warriors. The announcer then calls the first duel, Geo from the Black Blade versus Errol, the classless member from the Dragon's Claw. As he enters the arena, the crowd begins to whisper about him. The audience wonders why the Dragon's Claw Guild sent a classless weakling just to be humiliated, and Geo himself thinks the upcoming fight will be nothing but a waste of time. As soon as the judge gives the signal, Geo teleports in front of Arel and pierces him with his spear. Lilia gets worried, but Rihanna reminds her that it's just a shadow. When the shadow vanishes, Geo's arrogant smile wavers as he spins to attack another figure behind him, only to realize it's yet another illusion. He then spots two identical figures in the arena and believes he can defeat them using his dash ability, until he becomes aware of a third shadow materializing behind him. The three shadows surge forward and Geo destroys them, but the true Arel emerges from below his feet and strikes him down with a single blow. Geo falls to the ground, confused about how Arel created three shadows, and Arel replies that his mother can effortlessly make 5. With Geo defeated, the announcer declares victory and the crowd erupts in applause. Lilia cheers enthusiastically, while Rihanna is utterly shocked by how easily Arel took down a Class A swordsman. As the healers lead Geo away, Arel thinks that he still needs to practice more before he can truly master his critical blow. The crowd is amazed that an unranked swordsman managed to beat a ranked one. George watches on in silence as the next duel is about to commence. The Black Blade Guild's newest swordsman launches an attack on Arel, who effortlessly blocks it and then swiftly defeats him with a twin-bladed strike, securing yet another victory. During the subsequent fight, the foe attempts a close-quarters dagger attack, but Arel, like a phantom, emerges from behind and swiftly incapacitates him with just one blow. Even his own companions are amazed he's won 3 consecutive matches. Rhiannon then questions Lilia as to why she isn't participating. Lilia admits she doesn't stand a chance and would rather cheer him on. She makes Rhiannon join the shouts of encouragement as they watch Arel face a shield-wielding warrior. Arel effortlessly evades the attacks of his opponent, who finds it hard to believe that he is truly unranked. Arel compliments the warrior, mentioning he'll need to slowly wear him out, since breaking the shield is not an option. The man laughs, saying a hero without a class shouldn't be able to achieve that. Arel responds that his hard work got him there, but the shield bearer insists that sheer effort cannot overcome class. Feigning a sword attack, the opponent attempts to catch Arel off guard with a forceful shield bash. However, Arel anticipates the movement and expertly retaliates with his premonition ability. The blow knocks the shield away, and the man is shocked, thinking Arel learned the move from his previous opponent. Arel acknowledges he hadn't completely mastered the counter yet, but he can utilize it effectively in battle. He performs the maneuver again and brings his opponent to the ground. He then grabs the shield from the ground, further infuriating his foe, who charges forward, but Arel deftly dodges and then takes him down using the enemy's very own shield. With his 4th victory, the audience begins to question if he is truly classless, and the organizers demand to see his class identification card. Arel accepts, and the announcer then inserts her into a magic crystal. The crowd falls silent as the result confirms that he is legitimate. George feels the crushing weight of defeat, and even Rhiannon starts to truly believe in their victory. Lilia becomes irritated that she hadn't known about Arel's true power sooner, stating she would have wagered even more money. Rhiannon remarks that he never expected Arel to grow so much and wonders how he trained for the past 5 years. Meanwhile, Lilia decides she'll marry him, thinking that no matter what happens to the guild, she can rebuild it with him by her side. While she schemes, Arel feels a shiver run down his spine from her dark aura. Finally, the announcer introduces the last fighter from the Black Blade Guild, Master Masamune. Arel notices his katana, and Rhiannon recognizes him as a rare samurai. Knowing Masamune has never fought in public, Lilia concludes he is the rival guild's trump card. As the duel commences, Masamune calmly touches his sword, and Arel feels the immense weight of his presence. Noticing Arel's hesitation, Masamune smirks and confirms that he is deliberately waiting for him to approach so he can unleash his ultimate technique. Upon hearing the taunt, Arel begins to advance towards Masamune, who is visibly taken aback. He explains that they simply cannot remain motionless like trees for the duration of the fight, and he also wants to see Masamune's strongest techniques. Masamune laughs, stating that Arel won't have sufficient time to react or perceive it if he unleashes his supreme technique. Nevertheless, Arel maintains his self-assurance in his quickness and continues to advance. He observes Masamune's sword, still in its scabbard, and ponders if he intends to deliver his decisive attack in just one swift blow. Arel contemplates using his shadows but ultimately refrains, sensing that Masamune's intense focus makes him impervious to deception. He holds directly before his opponent, fully aware that just one strike will determine the outcome of their battle. Both men hold their breath in anticipation. And as Arel takes his final step, Masamune instantly attacks with a lightning-fast strike. However, Arel disappears right in front of him, leaving Masamune completely shocked that he had moved so fast using his real body. From behind him, Arel acknowledges Masamune's impressive speed, yet he remarks that his own trainer is considerably quicker. He then unleashes the Tempest-piercing strike, which overwhelms Masamune and knocks him to the ground. Rhiannon and Lilia are left utterly astonished, recognizing the Sword Princess's ultimate technique. While the audience can hardly believe he won, the announcer confirms the outcome, and everyone begins to yell at the Black Blade Guild for having lost all their money because of the bets. Arel's 2 companions celebrate the victory, and Lilia attempts to embrace Arel upon his return. He evades her, letting her drop, and explains it was simply a reflexive self-defense move, as his elder sister had trained him that way. Lilia quickly cheers up, thinking about all the prize money, and Arel notices Rhiannon standing with her arms wide open. She recognizes her embarrassing stance and feels quite ashamed, but Arel expresses he'd like to hold her without her armor. Lilia offers to accommodate him, but he lets her fall once more, as George grinds his teeth, swearing to get even for this humiliating loss. That concludes episode 3. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next installment. The 3 members of the Dragonfang Guild celebrate their tournament victory with a grand banquet. Apparently, Lilia is already of legal drinking age, so she helps herself to a mug of beer, while Ariel and Reiner, looking like 2 innocent children, opt for juices instead. However, Lilia resumes her playful teasing of Ariel, and this time she earnestly starts to implore him to marry her. Although you can tell she's a bit tipsy, it's very probable that she would do the same even if she were sober. Ariel immediately rejects her marriage proposal, but Lilia persists, going so far as to promise to fulfill all of his youthful desires. Ariel, on the other hand, had already made it clear that he isn't interested in flat-chested women, preferring curvy women such as Reiner. This unexpected comment leaves Reiner completely without reaction. Despite Ariel having been flirting with her ever since they first met, Reiner still believes he's being deceitful. He promises he's being sincere, but she continues to doubt him. She's convinced she's not attractive, having spent her life hearing that she has a masculine appearance. Meanwhile, the two of them seem to completely ignore Lilia's presence, who is still there, being left out. Reiner maintains that she possesses no feminine allure, quite ironically, as her charms visibly sway without restraint. And Ariel, our cultured young man, can't take his eyes off her. Of course, he completely disagrees with what Reiner is saying. Nevertheless, she states unequivocally that she is not seeking a romantic involvement at this time, for her sole ambition is to attain the title of the strongest swordswoman globally. Lilia, on the other hand, stubbornly holds on to her delusion and tries to seduce Ariel, making suggestive advances and even telling him to come to her room if he feels tired. She tries to entice him with a relaxing massage, but Ariel completely disregards her offer. He flatly states he would prefer Reiner's massage, which, as expected, enrages Lilia. All joking aside, Ariel and Reiner get back to their training, and he continues to take a beating from her as he attempts to copy her courage skill. The guildmaster, Rod, emerges after hearing the commotion and asks if they are making a mess to relieve their frustration from having lost the tournament, entirely oblivious that they were in fact the actual winners. Lilia quickly puts him in his place, explaining that they defeated the Black Blade Guild. Rod, disbelieving, inquires if the Black Blade Guild dispatched only novices to combat them, but once he discovers that all the opponents were at least A rank and that the classless Ariel single-handedly defeated them all, he then realizes that the boy is indeed something truly special. Despite this, Rod doesn't get overly excited, stating that Ariel will inevitably be recruited by a stronger guild and that their own guild is doomed to fail once more. Lilia confidently reassures her father not to worry, as she possesses an infallible plan to keep Ariel by their side perpetually, compelling him into marriage with her. This revelation unfolds before Rod has a chance to even respond. Ariel explicitly states he never made any promises, once again shattering Lilia's heart. Nevertheless, he reprimands Rod for having lost hope, suggesting he should fight until the very end, just like his own daughter does. Otherwise, he might as well cut off his other arm and just quit altogether. Offended, Rod cries out, proclaiming that his days as a swordsman were over the moment he lost one of his arms. After all, a dual-wielding swordsman is nothing without both of his blades. Ariel, however, did not agree, reminding him that he himself had defied the rules and become a great swordsman through his own hard work. Rod decided not to argue and left. Meanwhile, Ariel and his two companions discuss how they could assist their old master in rekindling his passion for fighting. Ariel mentions that he would really like to train with Rod, aiming to become even stronger by copying his skills. As that isn't currently an option, Lilia proposes an alternative, exploring the city's underground dungeon. Ariel and Reiner are on board with the idea, and Reiner in particular is thrilled as she wants to gain more battle experience for the upcoming Sword God tournament. Ariel, not understanding, then asks, "What exactly is that?" And she goes on to explain that this event is indeed the largest Sword God tournament held in the City of Swords, which determines who is the Supreme Swordsman. Assuming Ariel also wants to participate, Lilia brings him a registration form, but instead of signing it, Ariel tears it up. He then realizes that the paper was, in fact, a marriage certificate, which was yet another one of Lilia's attempts to get back at him. Ariel takes hold of Lilia and playfully but firmly restrains her until she apologizes. Meanwhile, in a shadowy and remote location, a sinister mage in George's service discloses that she has been covertly observing Ariel's group, and she informs her master that they plan to depart for the city's dungeon on the following morning. Upon hearing this news, a smile forms on George's face, and he immediately begins plotting a small accident in the dungeon to permanently eliminate Ariel. The next morning, Lilia stealthily enters Ariel's room, clad only in her sleepwear, with the expectation that upon waking, he would be captivated by her adorable appearance. Just as she's about to plant a good morning kiss on him, Ariel awakens and metes out a well-deserved punishment, literally squashing her face, but he doesn't stop there, not at all. He tied Lilia to the bed before leaving the room, ensuring she wouldn't disturb his peace any further. Later, the trio makes their way to the dungeon's entrance, discovering numerous teleportation circles that provide direct access to specific floors. This setup greatly simplifies things for adventurers seeking to confront particular monster types. Deep within the dungeon, they come across monsters that are essentially living armors. Ariel easily defeats them using his quick advanced skill, but then realizes the problem is that these monsters possess infinite regeneration. Nevertheless, their nature makes them ideal for sword training, a fact that brings Ariel much satisfaction. However, he notices that Lilia isn't participating in the battles and inquires if she possesses a class at all. Proudly, she proclaims herself a skilled swordswoman and eagerly volunteers to impart all her abilities to Ariel. Ariel, nonetheless, rejects the proposition, as he has already mastered all the techniques of the Advanced Swordsman Princess class, which, coincidentally, is the very same class his mother was a part of. This renders Lilia utterly useless, a point Ariel doesn't hesitate to vocalize, much to her intense humiliation. Despite this, Lilia persists, claiming she can impart something even more valuable, the essence of compassion. Upon hearing this, Ariel and Reiner merely stare at her for a moment before they completely disregard her existence. As the two sword fighters move forward, they hear cries for help in the distance and decide to investigate. They discover an injured boy sprawled in a pool of blood who claims to have stumbled into a trap that spun out of control. The situation doesn't appear out of the ordinary since everyone is aware that such accidents frequently occur within the dungeon's depths. Reiner offers to escort him to a safe place, but the boy firmly insists that his friends must be rescued first. Reiner finds this reasonable and proposes they lend their aid. However, Lilia cuts them off, stating that they shouldn't help anyone without getting something in return, and she insists on payment. It's quite ironic, as the very girl who wanted to teach compassion now displays absolutely none. The boy recognizes Lilia, mentioning he has seen her in several interviews. She, being quite vain, hopes it was during an interview discussing swordswomen, but is sorely disappointed to learn it was about a guild that was in decline. Realizing her fondness for money, he proposes a reward, which Lilia promptly accepts without any hesitation. Before they go deeper into the dungeon, Ariel mentions that something feels off. The boy is bleeding, yet he moves with an unexpected normalcy, a feat that would be impossible were he genuinely weakened. Nevertheless, Lilia firmly believes the payment is genuine, so she continues to follow the boy to the presumed location of his friends. Upon their arrival, they discover nothing but a vacant chamber, devoid of any individuals, marked solely by bloodstains and a lone gold coin resting on the ground. Driven by overwhelming greed, Lilia rushes forward to seize the gold coin, inadvertently triggering a teleportation trap in the process. Everyone is sucked into the trap, including the boy, who apparently wasn't aware that it would transport everyone present. They suddenly find themselves on an entirely unfamiliar dungeon floor, so profound that neither Reiner nor Lilia had ever set foot there previously. The area is empty and has no exit, which raises the tension between them. As they try to figure out the situation, the boy starts screaming in anger about what happened. Lilia attempts to approach him, aiming to demand an explanation, but she inadvertently takes the coin, causing it to roll into the heart of a portal that unexpectedly springs to life. Then, a monster emerges from it, covered by an impenetrable shield, a sight none of them had ever witnessed. Startled, they turn towards the boy, seeking answers from him. Trembling, he confessed he was only paid to lead them to this specific spot in the dungeon. From here, they would be transported to the deepest level and forced to confront the most formidable beings, known as the Sword Gods. Before they could completely process the revelation, the monster unleashed a long-range blow, a devastating slash that severed part of the boy's head and destroyed a section of the wall. Fortunately, Ariel had pushed Lilia out of the way at precisely the right moment, saving her. The monster then uses another swift and sudden skill, pinning Ariel tightly against the wall. Ariel swiftly retaliates, as the others are left in utter shock. He explains that this ability is an advanced level of blind dash, known as Divine Step, and he willingly allowed himself to be struck because he desired to obtain it. He counterattacks and engages in a sword fight with the monster. All of a sudden, the monster unleashes a formidable skill, Divine Presence. It is so powerful that people cannot move anymore. This reminds Ariel of his training with his mother. After numerous attempts to withstand her divine presence, she told him he had finally conquered a small part of it. However, after mastering the divine presence, the logical next step was to employ the infinite rupture technique. She attacked him with that technique, and a light flashed across the sky. In that moment, he decides to use the same attack against the monster. He strikes it by flipping a coin and cutting it with his sword. The monster then disappears completely. Everyone is utterly impressed. They inquire how he managed to defeat a sword god, and he discloses that he himself was trained by one. His mother, in truth, is a sword goddess who took on the disguise of a sword princess because she truly dislikes being the center of attention. Reiner regrets having fought her, as she realizes it would be impossible to ever defeat someone like that. Having vanquished the god, a portal now materializes, and they make ready to depart. Lilia asks the boy to accompany them, and he is quite surprised that they cared enough to extend an invitation. Sometime later, Rod heads to the local bar for a drink. He thinks about Ariel's words that all he needed was one arm. While he's reflecting, some guys nearby talk about the trap they set for the adventurers and how they left one of their own friends behind to die with them. Rod overhears the name of the guild and realizes they're talking about his daughter. He furiously approaches them and demands an explanation, smashing their table. Before a fight can break out, George appears, smiling. He states he's delivering the unfortunate news that Rod's daughter and her friend perished in the dungeon. Rod cries out in desperation. George was the very same man who had ruined his arm, and Rod cannot grasp why he would now also take his daughter away. Before he can faint from the news, Lilia and her friends enter the bar to celebrate their victory. She sees her father and George and finds it strange. George is utterly shocked to find them alive and questions how they could have possibly survived that dreadful place. They admit the battle was difficult, but with Ariel, they were able to secure a victory. George, in disbelief, storms out furiously. In his room, he yells that he had already defeated Rod by destroying his arm and that the Sword Princess had vanished. Now, when he should be the strongest man in the kingdom, he has to compete with some classless kid. His rage awakens a hatred-shrouded sword. The sword then offers its assistance to him. Will he decide to accept its offer?